we can converse.
I think they have now signaled me we're good, so let's get started. Okay, my name is Dennis Speed, and on behalf of the LaRouche Political Action Committee, I want to welcome everybody here today. We've had many different matters seem to impact the world this week, but Mr. LaRouche has been making a very important point for the last 2 weeks to his colleagues as well as to his soon-to-be colleagues, which is that there's a need for a higher level discussion. And there's a process underway here in Manhattan, which over the next several weeks is going to force that higher level discussion into being. You've already just participated in part of it, and now we're going to go into, if you will, part two. So, Lynn, do you want to say anything to start us off, or would you want to go right to questions?
I think we'll go to a background question, which may make things easier for people to open the discussion. The point is that what is happening is the leadership of the people in the United States is not clearly understood because we don't understand what the requirements are of the performance of leadership in the United States. And this is something which has to be developed. If people think that everything is the same, or that all voices are equal, or that all options are equal, that's a great mistake. Because everything that's important is beyond mankind's ideas as such. But mankind, by examining their own ideas, are able to discuss new and higher ideas. And that's what we're trying to do. That's what we have to do. Because mankind in its current habits is useless. For example, we have scientific programs, which were just reopened recently because of a new change in the principles of the organization as a whole, the national organization. Because we're back to the kind of program which was used when the space program was functioning. Now since that time, the space program has been suppressed in various ways. Now we've come into an area where ideas don't mean much unless they're in accord with the space program principles, as in southern Mexico, pardon me, I'm choking. So that's it. We had some of our people down to Texas, to the area. She is, of course, the resident person, is a highly skilled specialist person in this program, the program which was operating prior to Obama's shutting down the space program. Now the factor of the space program is brought back into reality, and to reality for all men and women in the United States, whether they know it or not. And therefore, things have to be spoken in a different way and with a different intention. And everything of mankind depends upon understanding that shift in approach to behavior of human beings in the United States in particular.
Okay, thank you. So let's go with the first question.
Ready? Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. LaRouche.
Good afternoon, young lady. I know you very well.
Good, thank you. I have a little bit of an intro. I'm going to try to keep it brief, but I wrote down a few things that just to keep me on track. Now, the way I see it, and what I think you're getting to, and what I'd like you to comment on, is that we are in a time in history where we're living under a true tale of two cities. And there's a battle between these two paradigms, and it's reached a decisive moment. So we have life on one side, we have death on the other. Now the life part is dealing with Helga's conference in New Delhi, where the countries of the BRICS nations, India, China, and Russia, are future oriented. They're looking to the future to build a better world. And they are doing things like the space program that we have lost. They are building those types of things towards that future orientation. And then on the other hand, I'm noticing a very disturbing trend that's taking place in the minds of our citizenry and has even been expressed in some of our own members. And that is this insidious lesser of two evils thing. You know, should I take this poison over here? Or can I stand the stomach ache for a minute and kind of live through that? Or if I take this poison over here, then, you know, I'll die in 10 seconds. So we have this compromise idea. You know, maybe we can get Bernie Sanders to do something good. So we jump Trump, you know, his trash Trump. And we know that Hillary is an opportunist and she has capitulated to Obama. And Obama must have told her, you know, stick with me, babe, and you'll be president one day. So she lost all her humanity. And then Bill said, come on, Hillary, honey. You know that if you go with Obama, you're going to lay down with dogs and get up with fleas. And she said, oh, shut up, Bill. So then we have Hillary. Okay. So now we're at a point where we can no longer ignore the fact that any of this is going to lead to death. And we have to, as a citizenry, go with changing the presidency, finding someone or something that we can do as citizens that brings the presidency under the Hamiltonian idea, and maybe we can save ourselves and our nation in that way. And we must go with life. We must go with the bricks. We must go in the direction of the future, and not with these three clowns and all the things that they represent under the British Empire. And I'd just like you to comment on that.
Sure. I will discuss. What the point is that mankind, in history, the United States is dying. The entire United States right now is dying. The economy of the people of the United States is rotting away while the nation is dying too. Wall Street is dominating things, but Wall Street is a corpse. It's a walking corpse. There's no substance in Wall Street. None. Nothing is worth anything in Wall Street. And it's about to die. And very soon, unless something miraculous is done, the whole nation will disintegrate and die at an accelerated rate because there was nothing left inside the U.S. economy in the population to induce the population to rescue themselves. That's where we are. We are now in a period where the United States is not a great hero, no longer. It ceased to be a great hero for many decades now. And very few people are qualified or have the ambition or feeling or commitment to do anything to change that. Now, some of us are trying to do it right now. We have a young lady who is not entirely a young lady, but a veteran senior lady. And we started the space program again. We were people not who originated, but a team which was committed to reviving the space program approach. Now, this is also in contrast to all evil in general. France is evil generally, Britain is evil totally, and so forth and so on. So therefore, we only have a few people, largely in the Eastern Asian part, who really still have some viability, who are able to fight and to defend humanity. It's almost gone. Now the question then, therefore, is how do we, being inside Manhattan and being in this situation, where we have a government that's no damn good, or worse, and no chance that this government will do anything good for us in its present form. which means that we have to become a factor of leadership. We can't be the whole leadership, but we can be a factor of leadership. We're finding it, for example, in Texas. Now, certain people in Texas who are, businessmen and competent people and so forth, they are responding to this particular issue. So what do we have to do? We have to say we have to change the entire world. We have to grab from inside what we have as the talent we have, in particular from Texas, from southern Texas, where the space program was operating. Now we find that the revival of the space program is being induced within that tendency, with that group in Texas. And we are seeing that we must orient ourselves with relevant other parts of the world to bring together a new conception of man, at least an approximation of a good man, and concentrate on that. Our biggest allies are China, India, Russia, and so forth. The other nations that used to be the powers of the transatlantic community do not exist in that form anymore. Few individuals who have a grasp of this. But the general policy and practice of the people of the United States, the people of the Americas in general, is they are dead unless we can revive them.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Lynn. It's Bruce from New Jersey.
Yes.
This week, we went up to the state capitol in Albany, New York, to get the Glass-Steagall resolution that had passed or been lost because of the not being moved on by the legislature there, to get that reintroduced. And I believe as of yesterday, that has been done by the relevant people that we've been associated with previously and some other people that are in the process of signing on. What I wanted to say about that is that this is all part of Hamilton's conception, or what I would say is the new Manhattan or Hamilton conception of the Manhattan Project. And there's also relevance to what you just brought up with the space program. I'm going to diverge a little bit and then get back to your point. I was watching a program about Leonardo da Vinci's Gift of the Magi, and what had occurred in some back and forth about it was what was really underneath the painting that exists now after hundreds of years. And due to the use of new technology, it was actually brought forth in much fuller and greater detail, the actual process, both the process of creation that Da Vinci did in producing this, but also what millions of people have never seen. Now, the space program is very much in the same way, and you've brought up the point about the dark side of the moon.
Yeah.
And what we have the ability to do, and which China has led by making this point on putting new technology there to look out into space and to look at what is there, is that we have the ability to get a better grasp of that intention of creation that will lend us. And that's very much what this NASA program can do, and reviving that. And its ability to create accord among nations will give us the ability to get past the present danger that the planet faces. Or as I brought up in a discussion on the way back from that trip to Albany, there is no planet B. So I'd like your thoughts on that.
We are in a very difficult. We're in a very difficult period. A strange voice came in, but we moved it away. That's a good thing to do. Now, if you want to understand this, you have to look at it at various levels of history, of total history. And one of the most significant models is that of Brunelleschi, who was one of the greatest geniuses whose skill underlaid the foundation of the Renaissance. He did it. And what happened was, of course, there were defeating factors and so forth. But what Brunelleschi represents, among other more distant figures, is the fact that mankind does have elements within it which does create the possibility of the future. And what she's trying, it's getting active. What we're trying to do is really restore a devotion of that nature, which is coincidental with that of Brunelleschi in terms of his life's work. And those who followed him, and you find the Renaissance was based on Brunelleschi's model. There was nothing there creating a good system. But Brunelleschi was bringing it on. And the people who had been planning to take over everything just had to sit aside because they were not fit to quit. And that's what happened. And then we had people who followed Brunelleschi, and they did lay the foundation of creation. The point is, mankind has to contribute, even in terms of a limited number of individuals. And those individuals in particular must devote themselves to bestirring a general population which otherwise would roam confused to the process of history in general.
Thank you.
Hi, Lynn. This is Howard from Baltimore. My question relates to an experience I had at work over the course of the last couple of weeks. I have the opportunity at work to listen to classical music for about 7 hours a day, which is nice. And I had the opportunity to train various people for the job that I do. And, of course, I introduce each one of them to classical music since, that's what I listen to and I'm training them. And it was a very sort of awkward question that each one of them independently asked. And they asked me when I listened to classical music, what do you get out of classical music? What do you get out of listening to classical music? And I didn't really know what to say at first, but on reflecting, it seemed to me anyway like a very sort of possessive question, like what do I get out of classical music? What do I get out of life? And stuff like that. My question is, what specifically in the culture of young people or general that induces people to think like that, or induces sort of the worldview of people to think very sort of possessively?
Well, there are various aspects to that, so it's not a unified kind of phenomenon, but the relationship as a whole, this is the whole relationship, does have certain coherences, so that you can get an aspect of it from one side and you get an aspect of it in a different way from the other side. In general, what we call the classical music, the true classical music, and I would say that you can concentrate on. And on that, you'll get a difference between what the music is and what the speaking voice is, or the argument, or the yell, or the whatever it is that goes through it. And there's something which is, we call it harmony. But harmony is such a vulgarized term that you hate to use the word harmony. But you do mean something which is also coincidence with harmony. Harmony. It is not the way you speak, not normally. It's not the way you argue, not normally. It is something which you say, yes, but. And they say, yes, but this is the beautiful. This is the truth. This is the happiness. This is the achievement of the nation, of the people. And this is not a language which is a written language. It's not even often a spoken language in the ordinary sense. It's what we call real harmony, human harmony. And that is the real basis. When people, great drama, which is also a form of harmony, when in its best form, music in its best form, is something which is sacred. It is not the ordinary noise making in any sense. It's not making little jigs, little rhymes. It is something which seizes the person who speaks, and the fact that the person is imprisoned with the magic, so to speak, for them, of saying this rather than that. And that is where the thing lies. This is the whole period of the concept of true classical art in every sense. And that is the thing that defines the ability of the soul to become functional. And that is what grips us. Because these are the things we call the popular music. I hate it. I despise it. It's rotten. I know it's rotten. I knew it for almost when I was born. About that time, my crying, of course, was dried out after a while. They couldn't hear that anymore. But anyway, that's the point. There is a certain development of the human mind, which, when matured in a certain direction, leads mankind into an open gate to see an opportunity which would be otherwise invisible. And this is what we call classical artistic composition.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Mr. LaRouche. This is Rick from Bergen County, New Jersey. You may have answered my question in your answer to the previous question, but looking at your attitude, if I understand it correctly, towards physical economy, one notes that today one gets all kinds of points of view as to what's going on economically. You'll have one guy saying nothing's wrong with the American economy, everything is fine. You'll have another guy saying that the existence of negative interest rates shows that the so-called, what he calls the financial economy, is about to self-destruct. Now, in the past, I've noticed that you tie in, and none of these other guys seem to do it, but you tie in the idea of economy to the well-being of the population. And you have stated on several occasions that proof that the economy is crashing is the fact that the system cannot take care of its own people, which is certainly the case. And this was repeated last night when in the Friday night thing with Jeff, who reflected a sentiment of that nature. So my question is, and I don't want to specify because I want to ask it to you in a general way, what is truth?
Truth is the fact that the human being is not an animal, number one. Secondly, the human being, not being an animal, has a potency which no animal has and is not likely to get it. That in this process, that mankind is actually dedicated to creating babies. Babies who are completely ignorant of anything else before them. Because the babies tend to become smarter than the parents. That's the purpose of society. In other words, our purpose is not to make successful babies. You have lots of successful babies of that type, and they're no damn good. So you don't want that kind of baby. What you want is the development of a human being and the process of their maturation and the conditions under which they live and develop. You want human beings who have a creative power which their previous generation did not achieve. In other words, there's the miracle of the newborn achievement, who achieve in themselves something beyond what previous generations have understood. That is, in a collective form. And you create a policy of humanity, a body of people who adopt that development of that policy, being trained to come out of being babies and just infants. And as they progress, they don't believe in the school teachers. They don't believe in the books. They don't believe all the prescriptions because they know they have to be tested to making discoveries which no man before has ever fully understood. And therefore, it's this development of the children from that course to make babies who are smarter than their parents in this process. In this process, that the parents, by nurturing the babies, are actually producing, by development, a development process, a child who is more promising for the future of mankind than any other person beforehand. And that's what our purpose is to do, to organize society in a way where the people, the young people in society, are enabled to grasp that distinction. It's not the birth of the baby that makes the great mind. It's rather the great mind when it comes into development under social conditions which are appropriate, that baby is able to create something the previous generation was not able to master. And so our job is in society is to create the development of the kinds of babies and children from them who can represent a new generation which is superior in all qualifications of achievement to any generation which has existed before. That's the intention. There may be an example and so forth, but that is the goal. That is the intention. It's the principle of true goodness.
Thank you.
Hi, Yusuf Bahami, a business consultant in New York City, New York, and the greater New York City area from Newark, New Jersey. Mr. LaRouche, first of all, I want to congratulate you for your past endeavors start in 1982, notably with the Mexican President José López Portillo and Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi.
Yeah.
As we speak today about the forthcoming international conference, the Manhattan Project, I want to get back to the concept of expansionism that was brought by the original triangle approach, Paris, Vienna, Berlin, leading to the potential Silk Road approach. So I'm anxious about the fact that the 1990s and 2000 expansionism that was initiated by the 41st President of the United States, George Herbert Walker Bush, that was under the name of the New World Order, and by the European Union, via the Maastricht Convention that concretizes, by the occasion, that have concretized by the occasion the ideas of Monet and Coudeneuve-Calergy in Europe. This expansion, Mr. LaRouche, I believe, have abated. Jean-Marie Le Pen, the honorary president of the Front National in France, even was lauding that Europe, from Brest to Vladivostok, was an utopia that consumed nationalism. In the United States, where left seems more popular and more efficient to the majority of the population because each country has its own history and culture. In the United States, under President George Herbert Walker Bush and under President George Walker Bush, we have seen a domino effect at the level of the economy, at the federal level, debt-wise, but also at the level of the economy of many states. Regions, counties, cities, towns, rural communities, and all sorts of districts. Matter of fact, the only period of surplus was during the presidency of President Bill Clinton, the flourishment era, and during the presidency of President Obama gradually, which is a recovery era. So my question, preparing for the continuity with a potential presidential presidency of former Secretary Hillary Clinton, how can we foresee, Mr. LaRouche, an effective rule of the Silk Road and its axes of economic development within this context of action, within the sake of a liberal left progressive project for the United States. What we need is experience, not change. Change is overrated and a tool for demagogues. Thank you.
Well, what we have, first of all, all right. The United States is not producing any significant examples of great merit in society. If anybody's being of great merit, they are strange to the population in general. The United States population is rotting away. The death rate of people who had been employed as employees they're dying. They're committing suicide. They're being killed. And under the recent governments, the Bush family, the Obama group, and so forth, these are satanic forces, which are largely of a British nature rather than an American one. So first of all, you have to free the people of the United States of these diseases, which are typified by George Bush, the various George Bushes, the burning George Bushes, whatever they are. Right? If they're useless, they're destructive, they're killing mankind. And therefore, we have to bring from among ourselves the association of people who have not only the will, but they develop quality to free mankind of what the British represented, what France represents, what Italy is now sliding into, what Spain is driven into, what Portugal suffers from, what most of the nations of South America suffer from. And then we have a few nations, Russia, China, now India. Other nations are beacons. And what is happening there, we have people in creative forces who in the new program that's coming up for the next 2 to 3 years, a program of space exploration behind the back of the moon. And this discovery, which is the continuation of what was intended by the original discovery of space, is got to be brought back in. We try to bring it back in. China is trying to bring it back in. Russia is trying to bring it back in. Parts of Italy would like to, but aren't able to, and so forth. So therefore, we have to have a struggle for all humanity, and in that process, locate elements of humanity which are ready and able to begin the task of developing a new picture for the future of mankind.
Thank you.
Hi, Lynn. So I want to shed some light on probably the most important thing in world politics that happened last week, which is your wife's trip to India, which, I mean, she's traveling all over the world and suddenly she pops up in India, and not just anywhere, but at the Raisina Dialogue, which is an international forum, a conference hosted by the Indian government, which had 130 nations participate, and they want to keep it as an annual thing. And I was very happy about that because, I mean, because also not just that Helga was there, but India was fortunate enough to hear and have a real sense of authority coming from Helga about what's really going on in the world, and have a real and she really helped. Her speech, from what I heard, was very direct and very powerful. So, and it definitely helped it surprised a lot of people that I've been organizing in the Indian community and the diplomatic layers here in Manhattan around the upcoming conference. They were definitely taken aback and very surprised, very happily surprised. So we're waiting for more reports, of course, from that. But do you have anything to say to us?
Well, what we're in is a general process. And you will notice that Helga has spent a good deal of her life so far in terms of China. She has also dealt with other areas, But China has been one of her special areas for a long period of time. She's part of these trips that they do and so forth. And from the time that she was, when I was still not old, I guess is the way to put it. From that time on, when I was living with her there in Germany, and she was on her trips around various parts of the world, and this was a process for which she was a increasingly insignificant figure. She's close with China, India, other parts. I've been to participate in the same kind of things at various times in my lifetime. So the point is that is the only way I can say this is to say that what I know is that when people are able to distinguish themselves from foolishness or various temptings of foolishness, that sometimes you get people who contribute something that other people do not. And that's what one of Helga's promptings are.
Thank you.
So I'm Rob from Staten Island, and recently Ash Carter, Obama's Secretary of Defense, has asked for a massive increase in defense spending, including troop buildups along the Russian Federation border. How does this new Cold War policy contrast with the Syria ceasefire and other collaborations like the BRICS?
The point is we've got to get rid of this thing inside the United States. We have to eliminate that. Now, there are a number of leading figures in the United States who are opposed to Obama. And we're talking about Obama, really. The Bushes were evil, but Obama excels in evil. And Hillary is now become his sort of political mistress, who also peddles evil. And we have other people who present evil inside the United States among population there. So the problem is, how do we get the solution for this? And my view is you have to crash the program. You really have to crash it. You have to say, no, we do not accept this. And the other side of the thing is you have to realize that the problem is many people in the United States, most of the people in the United States are saying, I would like to be a good person, but unfortunately I have an obligation to Obama and to Hillary also. And Hillary is an agent of Obama now and has been for a recent period. She's a destructive force. She's an enemy of the United States, intrinsically. But she sold herself out. I know the time she had not sold herself out, and that involved a meeting I had with her when she was first in that position, and then she turned around very soon under the pressure of Jabbett and others there, and she became just gradually, step by step, exactly what they were, and that's the problem. We have to have people who are not that kind of people. You can't trust them otherwise.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Lynn, it's Alvin in New York. And on the webcast and on the site in general, recently there have been a lot of reports and presentations that are dealing with the necessary and ongoing paradigm shift. Now, the events that have been discussed in Seattle, Texas, and as just referenced a little earlier in India, and I guess really pointing largely to a lot of what in Texas in particular that Keisha's doing, and of course the leadership of China in pushing forward and other nations following its lead, have suddenly now in my mind really come clear that this shift is a real force and that it is the future and that the people of the United States need to join that future as opposed to slipping into oblivion and maybe even taking down the rest of those that would fight differently and are thinking differently. My question to you is, how do we bring our general population into this force, into this orbit that is very present and very real?
Well, let's take the internal United States and look at the internal aspects of the United States from the standpoint of the external influence shared in those sources. We have just recently revived a program of the space program. It was the space program which was destroyed by Obama. In other words, the United States economy has been destroyed by Obama since Obama. And what we've done now, we've reopened the Texas border to renew what had been done originally. She'd been involved in 3 or 4 actually major elections of different kinds as a leader in Texas. And so that was successful. What happened now in the breakout point, now what she represented in Texas in leadership gathered people from other quarters in Texas on this issue of getting back to the original program, the space program. We have defined recently that our organization is going to be based entirely under the control of that group, the group that formed the space program, responded. What we've done otherwise in this respect. And it's those requirements with actually 3 to 4 groups inside the United States who are active members in the United States. This is what we have. This is as much as we really have. That's the core of our existence as an organization. And what we've done is we have canceled the idea of little hot spots. One spot here, another spot here, another spot here, and another spot here. We've said we no longer have certified organizations which are independent of each other, among these 4 particularly. That the entire organization, our organization, and everything we represent in hooking to it are based on those considerations. And we've just affirmed that. We do not take in any kinds of practices which do not accord to that. And we're going back to the space program. And we are pushing the space program. And we will spread that influence of the space program into other nations which are already greedy in appetites for this same thing. The world needs a space program. A program for all mankind, essentially. A program which leads people to discover in themselves powers of creativity for the future of mankind, which mankind has never seen before. And that's the mission. And that's the mission, if fulfilled, is the best chance that mankind has to exist.
Okay, thanks.
So, Mr. LaRouche, this is Johanna from Manhattan, East Side. There's so many things going on in the world today, and I don't want to repeat everything that's already been said, but everyone has posed some wonderful questions. There are tools that have been put into place in various administrations that control our monetary market, our fiscal markets, our health markets. How do we deal with people that have been strategically put into places that are unconscious of the mechanisms that they are fulfilling in an automatic way, which interfere with the future? the future of the United States. I want to say, oh, well, let's go back to the way we were, but that's never going to happen. And I don't know if I really want it to happen, because there's such a great opportunity with the BRICS. I mean, yeah, we have the BRICS and we have the TPP and we have all the things that have been set into place to cause penalties on countries and here and there. How do you see, or help me out to have a better vision of how the possibility of dealing with all these cogs in the wheel, you know, the things that...
There's no problem. There's no problem, really.
No problem.
Right, because the problem is how do you simply gather together a coherent group of people, as a sort of a mass group of people, who in a very reasonable way decide to make things right. And that's happened to some degree in Manhattan. Now, you know, Manhattan has got more sin in it than any other part of the United States. Why? Because there's more of it. and that's the problem. So therefore, what are you going to do? Look at all those skyscrapers that are up there, like, you know, things like Trump, Trump, this sort of thing. You want these kinds of evil things around? Well, you got them. Trump is Trump. What we don't know what it is socially. We know it's some kind of ash can or trust, you know, something like that, but we don't know what it is. And we really don't wish to know what it is. We would be content to empty the skyscrapers of Manhattan, get these bums out of there, and then take over for the general welfare and tell people, let's clean this mess up. These are skyscrapers. These are very expensive things. And when they're used properly, they're very useful. For example, if you want the best hospital system in the world, Manhattan has the means within it to reform its existing instruments to develop the finest medical system in the world in the Manhattan skyscrapers and around it. The same thing is true in music, and we have proved that with music recently or freshly. Music, what Manhattan and old, and around it, same thing, the best effect. So if we clean the swindlers out of Manhattan and retire them to some place where they can play some kind of game, innocent game, where they don't do anything else. And we would be able to take Manhattan and say, well, Manhattan's the center of place. We can really, with all these skyscrapers and all the facilities there and all the history there, we could create one of the finest organizations, economic organizations on the planet, with just one place, the broader interpretation of Manhattan. All you have to do is get rid of the Obamas out. Get rid of the pumps out. Get them out.
What do we do with the people, the big corporations or the businesses that have offshored and don't pay taxes in this country?
Well, they are not going to exist anymore. They are not going to exist. They are about to die. They're about to be utterly smashed.
Okay, I'm good.
No, don't be happy about it, because this is a tough fight. This is a tough fight. We're going to have to do it, and we can do it.
Okay.
We're going to take the parts of the United States which are concentrations of useful characteristics for the population of the United States as a whole and the world as a whole. We're going to clean the whole thing out, get rid of the junk, and create an opening which will inspire the next generation. Inspire them. Look at the schools. Look at what's happened to the schools in Manhattan. Yeah? What about the universities? What's wrong with these universities? Why are they so corrupt? Because they're adapting.
And look at the other thing. Mr. LaRouche, while I'm talking to you, all these things are going off in my mind. All the hospitals are closing. People who have to go to hospitals have to drive 100 miles to get any care.
That's part of it. That's all part of it.
Not the
It's
way.
all things we can do. It's all things we can do if the New York City and adjoining regions are willing, are able, and able to open up the gates for the mission which Manhattan naturally represents. Get rid of the trash. Open up the schools again. Make them real.
Thank
and
you.
that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, Lynn. This is Christine from Montreal. I came down here about a week and a half ago. I was here in December helping organize for the Handel's Messiah concert for Christmas, and now I'm working on the Easter concert. I know you've talked a lot about the choral principle, and the organizing for this concert, I find, is completely different from the first one, where now it's the challenge of going back to everyone that was talked to the first time and challenging them to become active on another level. Moving on to past the Easter concert is this idea that we want to recruit about 1,500 people to the chorus, and I'm finding when I talk to people about this idea of how do you take back control of your future with all of the problems that are happening in the community, in the state, in the country. It's all stemming from a sense of demoralization and frustration that you no longer have control over your environment and over yourself and where you're ending up. And the idea of what you've talked about in the past with voice placement, I think, is key, one of the keys in people joining the chorus. And then the other is the interaction of the polyphony. The first Brooklyn rehearsal happened this week, and it was a good experience for people. One of the people who showed up, he was a 24-year-old who never really had anything to do with classical music, and basically just came because he was excited over the idea of having some professional training with this higher concept of what is your potential, really. I find that people are excited when I talk about this, especially with this this barrier of exiting from being just a viewer, an audience, and actually becoming a participant in a process of action, so that when you become part of the chorus and then you see your effect on the audience, you have a sense of empowerment that you can actually be a part of a process of change and no longer just feel like, well, everything's always bad, but what am I going to do? I think that the question I want to ask you is, people are very moved when I speak to them about this. And I make the point, too, that when you're an audience member of something beautiful, like a classical concert, like the Christmas one, for instance, you haven't yet internalized it. It's mostly an emotional reaction that hasn't yet evolved to a higher level of understanding. And when you're a part of the process, that already has developed into an actual understanding, such that when you're a viewer a week later, you don't have that ability to bring back that sense of optimism. You're dependent on a process to move you. You can't move yourself or a process. So when I'm talking to these people, they're excited, but I know that there's always that risk that when I leave them, the next day or a week from then, they might go back into that dark place. I was wondering if you had any, I guess, advice on how to move people in such a way that they can actually show up to have that energy long enough to show up to a rehearsal, so at least you can have that interaction with the polyphony, which then is much harder to forget about when you actually participate in it, but to talk about something that in the end you can only talk about music so far, or the choral principles so far. You have to actually experience it.
But the problem is oh God, there's no simple approach to this. What you're saying has a fallacy within it in terms of practice. Because yes, we do struggle, and we have been struggling recently in the Manhattan region for musical development and choral development. We worked in that direction. Now, this is a very frustrating endeavor, because around you, the population is not in agreement with that. Everyone is sort of pretty dirty, corrupt kind of stuff. They like El Cheapo stuff, or they are afraid of offending El Cheapo stuff. So you have to almost fight a war to acquire even a modest competence in music and in other classical arts. Same thing. So you live in a society which, from the time that Bertrand Russell entered power in the beginning of the 20th century, the rate of degeneration, an ever accelerating rate of degeneration among the people of the United States, has dominated the situation. Other parts, the British are naturally degenerate. It's their nature. But the point is, the problem is not how can you influence this individual, influence that individual. You've got to do more. You've got to create an environment which people defend each other in defending values which they know are the truth, and they are not given to collapsing and giving into popular opinion. The worst thing that any crime of any other crime, the worst crime of mankind is popular opinion. Popular opinion is the most evil thing available on the record of mankind in recent times. And that's what you have to fight for. You cannot try to decorate something from the outside. You have to get inside and save the soul of the person from the inside, not the outside. Right. You can get cheese at it. You get cheese at any place, but will it stick with you?
Thank you.
Hi, Lynn. This is John from New Jersey. I have a question on the space program. With Scott Kelly coming back down, it sort of brought some things into focus. It turns out that in 2018, he's doing a joint mission with a Russian cosmonaut, a Russian-designed mission, simulating a trip to Mars where they go up into Earth orbit for months, come back down, simulate activity that they would do on Mars, and then go back up again and spend a few more months in orbit, to simulate that. But so it's very interesting. But Russia in 2018 is also going to be bringing online a prototype nuclear fission rocket. And when Curiosity went to Mars, it did extensive readings on the radiation environment between Earth and in the interplanetary region. And so NASA has taken this and developed very specific parameters for how much radiation absorption, both from the sun and from cosmic radiation, which is much more difficult to deal with. And they've determined this is how much radiation absorption an astronaut can take. Yeah. And going with a chemical rocket, round trip, 520 miles, it's too much. But if you can get there in 4 weeks, it's tolerable. It's well within range. And so this, brings me back to your 1988, proposal, on Mars proposal, but that in the recent years, it didn't look like such a hot idea because the whole space program was pretty much taken down. And then you had these idiots going for the cheapo, let's send somebody up there, might not come back alive, all this kind of crap. But now you have with the Russia, China, India capabilities coming online, which are much more serious. And so the question is, where is the space program capable of going at this point?
The limitation so far. This is what's been going on up to this time was space program projects. Now, what was needed is to get the real cracker, and the real cracker was how do we come to an understanding of the principle essentially expressed in terms of the moon, the backside of the moon. Because the difficulty is how can you measure the characteristics of the backside of the moon? Now, in 1 year from now or later, China will have launched an exposition in terms of a study of the solution to the understanding of how the backside of the moon works. And it's only when we can understand what the backside of the moon really shows us by experimental methods, then we are able to understand how the organization of the system around us works. And China is committed to, at least the next year, perhaps the next year, to complete the preliminary study of the backside of the moon. Because until we get the coordination principles of the backside of the moon, we have a limitation. And we have never had an attempt to actually go that far. The space program was going in that direction among the various things it was doing. The landing on the moon first time. But the study was not complete. It was not generalized. Now we can do that. And China is going to sponsor the organization of the answer to that question in a broad sense of interpretation, physics, scientific, and we'll do that in the next year, I believe. It's ready for it now. Remember, this development was specified by China, by a special agent from China, who opened up all of these areas with his one career job. And this has now come to mean something much more important. And this has opened up new areas in terms of the planet, which were not even trying to work with before. It's there. Yeah, the good's there. The means was over there. But the program would have been operating had Obama not shut it down. Is Obama shutting down the space program is really what was killing. We already had a program which was on the edge of making new discoveries, new practices, new revelations. And we ran out of people. People would just begin to gone. And now we've got to do that again. And we now have to do that. We have to do this time. There are crises and problems which we have to confront, which have been neglected for a long period of time since the end of the space program. We have to improve that now. And China is committed to providing a leadership program on the backside of the moon. And that will make a big difference. And it will also inspire people. And the space program has always tended to inspire people. Because when you get up there, and you're not just up there flying back and forth, you're up there putting your skin on the thing and going through all the details you have to go to for security under these conditions. This trait activates the mind greatly. Thinking you're out there far from the surface of the earth in some kind of a costume or non-costume. You're out there for a period of time. You can't get back in time. You've got to wait until your appointment time comes for you. This is the history of it. But we have to bring back the kind of devotion to the discovery of the future of mankind. In a real sense, we have to do it now. And we have to start now. That's necessary. And for example, where does the water of Earth come from? Most of the work of author comes from the backside of the process. It comes from the is with the water source. In other words, the source of water is the major source of water in large. Is supplied by the galaxy. So the galactic functions are now on the leading consideration of these problems. These are great challenges, and they lead the fact of the study of the fact that a quarter of the water supply of Earth actually is a product of the galaxy. So these are the kinds of things that promote us to make adoptions policy, which are the key to say we can now begin to think of doing this. And mankind is not an animal of mankind. Mankind is a galactic soul, not only just the water supply of the galaxy itself, but other things of that nature. These are things which the control and development of the solar system and the immediate parts of the solar system around it are essential for the future of mankind. But only ignorance prevents people from recognizing that.
Thank you.
Hello, Lyndon. With the conflict in Syria and with the negotiations in full swing between the government and the opposition going on in Europe, the Kurdish factor is playing an ever greater role. What do you think about the influence of the Kurdish factor on American-Turkish relations, on the future of the Middle East? What's the role of the Kurds in the future?
I think what we're getting in the Near East is interesting because actually the transatlantic community is a broken community. It's a self-broken community. The United States is no longer a serious part of the world. It's a messy part of the world, but not a serious one. We have, in matter of fact, the history of the immediate future is centered in Russia going out to the coast of the Pacific. That's where the coast is now. That's where the area is. The United States is no longer a rival of this kind of process. The United States is degenerated, and we will have to really build up a new system to do that. Right now, Russia and China, and particularly Russia and China are most notable in this thing, are way ahead of the British, the transatlantic community. Yeah, sure, there are people that are intelligent there, but they're dying. They're being killed by the kind of market, the kind of economy that they're subjected to. Right now, the hope comes largely from Asia. Asia is where there's some places that are not too good, and Asia too. But Asia is an area which is superior in its current contributions to mankind, superior to the Antarctic, the Arctic regions, and to the so forth. So the areas we're coming from, the transatlantic area, is a booby contest compared to what is coming right now out of what Putin has led in his part, what China has done in his part, what is now coming out of India in commitments from Modi, and other things like that. And there are other things which are on the table which we can also open up in the Asian area, which will be very useful, like solving the problem of North Korea. North Korea is not a hopeless case. It's been made a hopeless case. It could be improved.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. LaRouche. My question is about BRICS. It's the second time I'm coming here, so probably it's the topic that has been already discussed. So the United States is part of the Western world. United States is linked to International Monetary Fund. So my question is technical. How do you think of joining BRICS technically?
Well, first of all, the problem is the whole organization. The degeneration of the United States, which came after Franklin Roosevelt, because Franklin Roosevelt was killed out, essentially, and died under those conditions, and the United States became a junk shop with occasionally great presidents who got killed, usually, quickly. So that the United States is a junk shop, economically, politically, socially. We have to try to end that. It can be done, but it has to be done. Right now, the history of the world is no longer the Atlantic nation. In other words, the Atlantic-based economy is not the center of the future of mankind at this time, no longer. So therefore, what's happened is you've got a situation where you have Russia, and Russia is not in good shape. Basically, it's been reconstructed a number of times in a number of rebuilding processes. What Putin has done is simply one of the most important contributions given to this process. But Putin now depends upon his dependence on his relationship to China. India is now coming into this in a big way. Other countries will come into this also in a big way. Right now, the United States, the transatlantic community, is a degenerate part of the international economy. We have to reverse that. But we have a population who are killing each other. They're killing themselves with drugs on a mass basis. They're being self-destroyed. And they seem to be impossible to prevent them from continuing that process. That's what's happening. It's happening because of the deep, very deep destruction of all morality and intelligence among most of the people in the United States. The last generation, the one that was, the generation started with Bertrand Russell at the beginning of the century. And we had several generations of young people, if so far, from those generations. The general trend of the people of these generations, especially the newer trends, are degenerate. They're almost, in the main, useless, worse than useless. Whereas Russia, with all its problems, and Putin certainly has problems he has to deal with, things like that. China has weaknesses, but China is a real powerful force. In other parts of the world of the continent there has potential, tremendous potential. And Russia will play its role, but the problem we have is the transatlantic community, the Atlantic community. That is the core of evil.
Good afternoon, Mr. LaRouche. To add to that, with the transatlantic system being the core of evil, my question is, in the wake of China's zombie factories, meaning that their factories are shutting down or already shut down due to lack of Western demand, and laying off 1.8 million steel and coal workers, how will China fare in the short term until they reach their goal of the Silk Road?
That rumor is false rumor. That's not the case. China is actually the nation which is on the highest rate of progress throughout the planet. There is no part of the world which is developing more rapidly and more effectively than China. But what's happened is, you'll get from population reports, you'll see reports of saying this is wrong with China. China has this error. China has this error. You look into the situation and you find there's no error. The error is entirely in the non-brain of the person who has that opinion.
I also plan, I learned to speak Chinese 10 years ago, and this summer I am going to China for 3 months to study. So I'll be able to see this firsthand.
You can see it. It was there. The point was it was an improvement, a very significant improvement in the policy adopted among the present leader of China. And those reforms are beautiful, and they're massive. I've had a chance with Helga, my wife, who works on this area as such. We're back to India, as I was back there for years ago, for a number of times. And so I was in this area, and I know what goes on there. A lot of it is pure, shall we say, fakery from the transatlantic community, who don't always tell the truth. In fact, they rarely do tell the truth.
Something else that didn't make sense to me that I saw in our media is that India is going to join America and Japan in patrolling the South China Sea. And that just didn't make sense.
It is not what's happening. Yes, what there is a growing mass of bringing nations, leading nations in that region of the Asiatic area, and building masses. See, the problem is India has problems, and I spent a lot of time in India, so I'm familiar with this. And they have a lot of problems. They have an agricultural problem, and this is because of a caste system problem, which is still there. And you have the leadership of Moto. You have the leadership from there, and they are progressive. I remember when I came out of military service and I went back to the United States. There was a debate on that, and I got in on the debate. I said, look, this thing will work because the physics of scientific development permits mankind to develop a high energy flux density program. Now the problem was, and India did develop a leap in this program. However, because of the cult characteristics of some aspects of India, the large population became a blot, an object, against realizing what the potential of India is. What has happened recently, most recently, is Moto has come in there to make a commitment to integrate the cultures of India. And that is a new term.
I can attest to the strength of India myself. When I was over in Kuwait for 2 years, there are lots and lots and lots of Indians in Kuwait working, and these people have a multitude of skills, from fixing, military equipment to installing generators to everything. So these people have their potential released. There really will be a renaissance.
That's right. It's the poor, agricultural poor, that were holding things back, and it was because of a cultural problem. And now we have a promise, and a highly probable successful one, which India is now going into now. So India is going to be a power, not as strong as Russia in some respects, and Russia has a long history with India, a very long history with India. And I was involved very much in this thing, in the process, in my lifetime. So these things are all there. And we now have, in this area, we have a wonderful opportunity placed before us. And I wish we had some that good luck, which the United States does not have today.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mrs. LaRouche. Rod from Brooklyn. In the last few weeks, we have seen the bankruptcy of the establishment political campaigns morally, ethically, and intellectually. During this time, both the US and Europe markets have closed with very heavy losses in the banking sector. During this time, we have been advocating restore Glass-Steagall, get rid of Obama, not necessarily in that order, increase in the space program with NASA, and the US should join the BRICS and the new Silk Road project. This brings me to the importance of your wife Helga's participation in the conference in India. Would you like to comment on this importance of Helga's work to address the crisis in Syria?
There's nothing much original about that in terms of history. Helga has been more and more involved in Asia and China and so forth. She's an expert in this area in many respects. So that's not really a new thing. What's happened is the importance of the improvement of India, that India's policy improvement was very significant for Helga, because she had at her beck and call, she had all the qualifications, masterful qualifications on this question on India. Remember that she has been in India with me through my life, from the time we married. And so we've had a very close relationship with these things and these matters in that period. It's the other aspects of the implications of that sometimes come across. What has happened, we have the leadership in India has decided to come across to unite, to get rid of this division of the characteristics of the internal Indian economic organization. This was the problem, because already at the end of World War II, we had a program in India among leading Indian firms on economic issues of which are highly, the highest value at that time. And they had it. But the problem was the population, the larger part of the population, did not have the practical access to that kind of practice. So the effect of that digression became a real problem inside India, and had various ways. For example, I was very close to Indira Gandhi. She was murdered. She was murdered by the Bush family. Huh? And therefore India was set back. Indira Gandhi was a giant in every respect in terms of her intellectual powers. She was assassinated. She no longer existed. She'd been murdered by the British. And I was almost shot by the same thing, by the same British operation at the same time. So, and at the same time, I had been pushing the economic development that, in the world, in India also. So all these things have been going on, but the problem is the obstacles of realization get in the way. And the British interest comes in a big way, and the British interest comes in a big way in trying to weaken India. That's the way it's worked. And so what's come now, we've come to a point, we've got to open the gate. We're opening the gate. We hope that this operation will will actually grip the situation. So this is not some great thing in and of itself. What we're looking at is part of the process, the oscillations of processes of development in the course of history, and the concern that we have to have to move things in ways which are necessary to roll things over to get over these obstacles. You know, when you talk about India and economics and science, military science, so it was already there. I was involved in that, but the development was a very long process and a struggling process. And then with the assassination of Indira Gandhi by the British Empire, and India we failed. And these are kinds of things that are very important in history. And what the British will do every time. The British and other people will kill people in order to eliminate the progress of a nation like India. And that's what happens often.
I understand about these programs that you're talking about because in the 70s, when I was in the Merchant Marine, we delivered aid cargo to India that was involved in some of these programs to try to help India, and ran into some of the obstructions that the British had of people that they had left in India after India's independence to mess the place up.
Well, it wasn't that bad. It was because we got out of that already. Indira Gandhi was part of the process, got rid of that problem. So what happened was not India. What happened was the British killed India. They killed Indira Gandhi, and she was killed at the time that I was on the chopping block.
Yeah.
So I'm very well aware of what all this stuff is.
Yeah. The reason our projects failed. Thank you.
Right, I think that's it for today. Lynn, I wanted you to address something that actually was provoked by what Christine said. And you started talking about, wait a minute, you have to take the organizing process to a completely different level. You create a social formation that is so involved in its own self-elevation, so to speak. It will defend itself. A group of people that are going to fight against the banality that's around them. Over the next weeks in Manhattan, we've got to expand this process because we have a particular international responsibility. But you've emphasized to me continually, don't panic, don't get anxiety-ridden, stick with what works. And I'd like you to say something about if you were here, you are here, but if you were here on the ground, right? How would you handle what we have to do over the next several weeks?
Not much difference than I'm intending. I'm very active on this thing. I don't know if you've gotten all of the up-to-dates on what I've been doing and what I've been doing in the context of this same meeting that we're having right now. Is I've changed the agenda. And because the point is, it's obvious that the organization, which our organization down there, and are different parts. Our organization is located in essentially 4 localities. Only 4 localities. All 4 of these localities are coherent. In other words, it's not 4 different localities. It's one locality with 4 different expressions. Right? The text, one of the big things that's developed in this case is a space program. We have reactivated the space program. I didn't do it just as that. Other people do it. We had a young lady who's very, very skilled, and she was in the space program. Suddenly the space program came back. The space program had been killed by Obama. It had been shut down. The space program is essentially shut down. And it was only recently that a break came through in certain parts of the southern parts of the United States. And it became apparent that we had an opening. So she, our chief representative, with other representatives of mine, went to work with a project. We reopened the space program, limited on a limited basis, but the idea was ignited. And that's what we're doing. That's what we will be doing. Now we would say, I got 3 particular areas, 4 areas in total. Texas, southern Texas. California, 1 area of California, it's actually the major area, California. In New York City, and in Boston, and elsewhere. It's 1 unit, 1 group, with Manhattan included. And that's my program. And I said, we shut down all these other ideas of having this group and that group and this group and that group. Forget it. We don't need that stuff. We have 1 policy. We assemble together on that basis of that 1 policy, and we say no more so-and-so instead of so-and-so instead of so-and-so instead of so-and-so. We have 1 organization as a reorganization. That's what we accept. And that organization has to be free to develop to its mission. And nobody else comes in. We're there in Texas. We're there in Manhattan, as such. We're there in San Francisco. Wherever I am. And so Helga operates in that. She said, she has her own location and things like that. So our idea is don't get divided. Don't get localities. Don't become a bunch of yokels. Local yokels are terrible things to have.
The final end of the Confederacy, huh?
No, get rid of it, damn it, forever.
Forever. Okay. All right. So, is there anything else you'd like to say in conclusion, or is that it?
Well, that's enough, I think, for what you want. So
does a good job. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll see you in the end next week.
Okay.
All right.